Thorpe is a man of many talents, and he has played very large roles in excellence wherever he's been. What some of you may not know that did not make it into the bio and is not online, maybe is ashamed of it, is he is also a former fellow broadcaster with us at WCHL. Because when he was in college, he would meet Kyle Whitford out at the radio station about 5 o'clock in the morning, and they would record jingles where you were the keyboard guy,
whatever instrument,
playing whatever needed to be played, which also, for some of you who just think that he's sort of a technical nerd, he also can play the guitar like Johnny B. Good, as he did spontaneously, and when we were at our inter-city visit, anybody here that was at that visit and you saw how he dazzled everybody with that? He walked up with a band that he had never met, and I still don't know how he did it. Maybe he was a band that he had never met, borrowed the guy's guitar, and while the band was playing, he and the drummer back and forth did Johnny B. Good better than Chuck Berry ever did in his whole life. Now, the one thing, however, because I'm still Holden knows that I am a reporter first, so he is also the editor of Science magazine, which I take primarily so that I can read his editorials and see that he is still trying to straighten the world out. But also, they needed some circulation help. So this morning, my new edition of Science magazine showed up. Well, you've got to sell copies, and we know what sells. So today, he's finally broken out, and there's an article in here. Well, I'll just read you the headline. Good vibrations. The role of mechanico-sensitive ion channel in sexual behavior is unveiled. Now, he's got pictures in here. And he explained to me that this is a brain. And he said, you'll probably need to have that explained. Now, the problem with this is that the word is going to get out because this, we think, is now, he's turned to 6. You're going to be banned in Florida and Tennessee. Circulation will go down. You'll have to go back to playing the guitar again. Welcome, Holden Thorpe.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everyone. It's great to be home. I'm Holden Thorpe. I used to work here. And I did work at CHL and 94Z. Jim made a lot of money on those jingles, and he paid me $10. And so I left here to work at a Jewish university where I was the designated Gentile. You got to have one because somebody's got to run the place in September. And I won't do any more Borscht Belt humor, but I know a lot of Yiddish that I learned in St. Louis. So Jim told me you might be interested in 3 things. I'll say a little bit short about each one and then take your questions, which will probably be more fun. My role in life, other than running the journals, which compared to the jobs I had in St. Louis and here, pretty small. I only have 200 people to take care of. Very complicated website, which is complicated to run. But Science is the most influential scientific publication in the world, and it's an honor and extraordinarily prestigious thing to get to do. But it's not the kind of overwhelming 24/7 management job that I had the other two. So I spend the rest of my time spreading the good news about science and why it's important to the world, and trying to demystify as many things as I possibly can. Because I'm in a very special situation that most leaders are not in. I have tenure at a rich university, George Washington University. I work for the AAAS. My bosses, the board, are other scientists, not titans of industry or hedge fund managers or political people. And so they like all the things that I say. And so I have a very special opportunity to be able to tell people precisely what's going on about anything that I happen to know about after all these crazy adventures. And, the one I mainly talk about is science, but I write a lot about higher education and the politics. And when people ask me about college sports, well, it turns out, I was the last guy picked to kickball, but I also had a very major role in college sports. which is pretty unusual, and I learned a lot of stuff, and given how many Carolina blue shirts are here, you probably have some questions about that. So let me just say a little bit about each of these three things. So as far as science is concerned, the scientific enterprise is thriving. There are so many exciting things going on. I think these weight loss drugs are going to change the world and change our health, and I'm very excited about those. Quantum computing is going to be big. I know there's a lot of churn about artificial intelligence, but and of course, you know, all these things have dark sides, but the positives that could come from artificial intelligence are extraordinary. But the politics of science are in serious trouble. I mean, we had a debate. I didn't watch it, but there was a Republican debate where somebody said, raise your hand if you think humans cause climate change, and no one raised their hand. So that is a failure of a lot of different things. It's certainly a political failure, but the failure that I focus on is that it's also a failure of science to explain what science is in a way that would help people process that and understand what it is that we're doing. Science is not the facts. Science is not the formulas. Science is not what's in your textbook. Science is a process carried out by fallible, messy humans who have every flaw that every other profession has. We have racism, sexism, homophobia, motivated reasoning, egos, office politics, all that stuff. Just like medicine or firefighters or police departments or things that we see on television, other professions, we have all those same things in science, and they cause us to make mistakes that we have to correct, and they cause us to change pretty much everything, because every paper that we publish eventually is going to be replaced by something else, and that improves on it, and that's what makes my job interesting. But we have done a lousy job of explaining this to the world. So while, there are all kinds of things that I object to that cause one political party to pretend like we don't have a major climate emergency on our hands, that they do, science has also brought this partly on ourselves by not doing the hard work of telling people how science works. So we can talk more about that if you want. It underlies what's happened with COVID, vaccines, all kinds of things that we deal with in science and as it relates to politics and public relations and stuff like that. As far as higher education is concerned, for public universities, we're in the most challenging period we've ever been. The trials and tribulations I went through were the warm-up act for what is going on now. Carol and Kevin have both done amazing jobs. I don't know why Kevin wants to keep going. But he's the best chancellor we could have because, Carol and I were okay scholars and pretty lousy sports people. Kevin is a fantastic scholar and a fantastic sports person, so he's probably the right person to be the chancellor of the University of North Carolina, but he's in a challenging situation with politics that I've ever seen. And the main problem is that you can't lead unless you have followers. And there's 50,000 people working at the University of North Carolina. And you can't just bark orders and tell them what to do. You can't go, okay, everybody suddenly change and believe the following. Even if you wanted to change it and that was a good idea, that wouldn't be a very good process to get there. And so when you have a politically appointed board that is at odds with the campus, it's not clear what the solution to this is. You could appoint somebody who agrees with the board, and they would have a hard time getting the campus to follow them, or you could appoint somebody who agrees with the campus, but then they're going to be in trouble with the board all the time. And I don't know the solution to this. If I did, I might not have gotten out. I was here in 2010 when the world changed. And a lot of what happened to me and everybody who was here with me had to do with sports, but it also had to do with politics. Because, as you all probably remember, yes, I worked for Jim Hebner when I was 19. My father gave Tony Rand, who was the Senate Majority Leader, his first job. I didn't have to go to Raleigh and lobby the legislature. I could just call over there to all these people that I'd known since I was 9 years old. In 2010, they all left. So whatever difficult challenge the university got into, whether it was about sports or anything else, even setting aside the fact that I disagreed with all those guys about politics, I also didn't know any of them. And that happened overnight. So this is a really complicated challenge. Frankly, I don't know what to do about it. I think in Florida, Texas, North Carolina, a lot of these places, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's the only thing I can think of. There are a few red states where it's going better. Interestingly, Alabama. Anybody notice you never see Alabama in the news for this kind of stuff? Well, I'm doing a project down at UAB, and I had a chance to ask the chancellor of the system and the president. I said, how have you guys avoided all this? And they said, well, we're doing something that most people can't do, which is we literally just go to the faculty and say in plain terms, this is what the legislature wants to do. We disagree with them. But if we want to get the best outcome possible, this is what we all need to do together. And it's easier at Alabama in a way because it's always been like that there. And in Texas and North Carolina and Florida, it hasn't been. And so I think those states are struggling with how to get past this. If Kevin went to the faculty council meeting and said those same things, it would be much more challenging than it probably is in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa, I'm sure. And same thing in Austin or wherever. And so that's we could talk more about that. Those are really big challenges. And thank God Kevin Guskowitz is willing to sit there in South Building and try to figure out what to do about all this. He asked me my advice, and I always tell him I don't know what I would do. Which brings me to sports. When I was going through everything, there were a lot of sort of devotees of the old Carolina ideals who would say, if Bill Aycock was still the chancellor, he would know what to do. And so, my wife, who's an angel, used to go to see Chancellor Aycock every 2 or 3 weeks at Carolina Meadows. And I said, next time you go out there, ask him what he thinks I should do. And so she did, and he said, oh, Lord, I don't know what I would do. How in the world would I figure that out? That's just brings me to, I guess, my last point, which has to do with all of these things, which is we tend to remember things the way they never were. And the things that we believe about Carolina sports, which were so intoxicating, that we could win all these games without breaking the rules, and that there was something special, about what we were doing. If that ever was true, it's certainly not true now. We're going to do everything. This is a university that's made a decision to be highly competitive in intercollegiate athletics. And we're going to do basically anything we have to do to succeed at that. And if you are uncomfortable with that, I'm really sorry to be the one to break it to you. But, I've been as far down in the beast as you can go. And, boy, I wish I'd learned this sooner. Because when I was trying to figure out what to do about Coach Davis, one of the most knowledgeable people in Chapel Hill came to see me. Somebody I knew well, but he made an appointment to come to the Quail Hill and talk to me. And he said, Holden, you got 2 choices. You can fire Coach Davis. No, you can keep Coach Davis, and you'll be remembered as one of the greatest Tar Heels ever. or you could fire him and you'll be a great president of Caltech. Well, I didn't become president of Caltech, but I've been the provost at Washington University in St. Louis and the editor of Science, which is almost as good, or maybe better, depending on your point of view. But I didn't realize there was a third door. And the third door would have been to just keep everything the way it was and get myself the hell out of here. You know, we'll never know what would have happened if I had done that, but I had to leave anyway. And part of the problem was I was trying to reconcile the old ideals of what we thought was there that probably wasn't even then with the reality that I could see. And turns out that's a Rubik's Cube that can't be solved. So I think when it comes to sports, you know, used to hear people say, we want to be Harvard 5 days a week and Alabama on the weekends. Okay, please stop saying that, okay? You have to be the University of North Carolina 7 days a week, all right? You can't be Harvard Monday through Friday and Alabama on the weekends. There are a lot of people here who want to be Alabama 7 days a week, and there are a lot of people who want to be Harvard 7 days a week, but you're not going to be either one of those. You're going to be the University of North Carolina 7 days a week, and that is an outstanding Southern public research university that has very high aspirations in competitive intercollegiate athletics. And that means that the university is willing to make a lot of compromises that would make a lot of people uncomfortable in order to do that. And in my opinion, you know, what I tell people is they say, because I went to D3, it was awesome. I walked into that basketball arena. It's about the same as the arena at East Chapel Hill High. And I mean, I was choking back tears in that place. It looked like where the St. Pat's Leprechauns played basketball in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I went to my first game and I said to somebody, "Where's the police officer?" They said, "We don't have any police officers at our game, Chief." You wouldn't have to, if you were the police in St. Louis, you wouldn't have to go to the basketball games. And we get there but you know, D3 basketball is really different. We came down and the other team scored a basket and we got the rebound and nothing happened. And I just instinctively stood up and started going like this. And everybody I work with looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "He's just standing there. He just got the ball. He's supposed to be shooting by now." And then Jump Around came on. And I looked over at Patty. I said, "Your song's on." And she said, "Thank God I don't have to do that anymore." So that's probably a good place to go to the questions. Thank you all for having me. It's great to be here. Yes.
You made me shiver. You made me shiver when you said it was going to get worse before it gets better. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I wish I knew, but I think that it's unclear to me whether the culture wars in higher education are useful in the presidential election. I mean, DeSantis seems to be backing off of it because I think he probably thinks it doesn't work. But in state politics, I'm certain it's still a gold mine. And so I think that, you know, de-wokeifying the universities, whatever that means, is a very, very useful political talking point. You know, we can debate all the reasons why it's meaningless. I mean, if I could indoctrinate my students, you think I could at least get them to read the syllabus? So I don't think that, you know, the faculty for sure are not the ones doing the indoctrinating. Now there's thousands of them, so you're always going to be able to find somebody who did some crazy thing that works for the politicians politically and the media and stuff. it is, but if you study these things, and even the study that the Republicans in North Carolina have been circulating, if there's any peer pressure that is causing the students to censor themselves and all this, is coming from their classmates, not from the faculty. Because college professors, by and large, are very capable of walking into a classroom and saying, "This is my students. I want to help all these people here," no matter what they walked in here with. Now the other students, there's pressure there, and there's also pressure. And this doesn't get nearly as much attention as it should. Maybe it's not good. I don't know, but the student affairs staff tends to be very, very liberal, much more so than the faculty. And that kind of flies below the radar because it's more politically useful to go after the faculty than the student affairs. Most people don't even know what that is. But if there's any overt sort of political effort coming from the university, it's much more likely to come from the student affairs staff than it does from the faculty. But even that is minimal. I mean, as I always say, if the University of North Carolina was devoted to trying to produce a state full of liberals, we've done a really, really bad job. So where are the results? I live in a hotel in Washington, and the Alger Hiss Society was having their banquet, which is a very conservative thing, to say the least. And I went over to the desk and I said, "What are they doing here? This is Washington, D.C., damn it. This is our city." And they were laughing at me. They said, "Sir, we let anybody rent these ballrooms." But I think it's going to continue to be politically useful to characterize the universities in Florida, Texas, North Carolina, as being sources of all these evil things. And I think the only thing, I do think the folks in Alabama haven't figured out. But the only way to get to that point is for people to be less fearful talking about it than they are now. College presidents, and look, I was the same way. I learned all this the hard way. I picked some of it up at the end, thanks to my friend Joyce and a few other people, that I was better off just telling people what was actually going on. But I spent 4 years or so not doing that. And it's very natural to see how that happens, because you're surrounded by this bureaucracy of lawyers and PR people, and universities need so much damn money that they can't afford to make anybody mad, because they need money from everyone, because all that construction and all these new things that they're trying to do and making the sports, people say, what does a college president wake up thinking every morning? They think about, how am I going to pay everybody? That's the only thing they think about. And so you can't make a bunch of people mad. And so it's very, very hard to say what's going on, which is that you have a campus that is mostly, but not exclusively, on the left, certainly not exclusively, and a board that's on the other side. And that's a challenging damn thing. And so you got to be able to tell the board that, and you got to be able to tell the campus that. And I was really impressed with these guys in Alabama last week talking about this, I have to say. But getting to that point in some of these other states is going to be really hard. Now, in the long run, these institutions are hundreds of years old. They'll still be here in 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. So these cycles will come and go. But that doesn't mean that I can see an easy way out of the one we're in right now. And I think the other really important thing, and Saul was kidding about Duke. Yeah. Look, Duke is a damn good university, I have to say. I always tell people, I have admiration for everything at Duke except their basketball program. I went to the Duke of the Midwest, and it was a totally different deal. Like, first thing, I don't know if y'all remember when I tried to put gender neutral housing in, okay? So of course the legislature tried to introduce a bill saying this was going to be illegal. So we pulled it back. I get to WashU, the students come to me and say, we want gender neutral housing. And I'm like, oh my God, no. So I call up the chancellor and I say, very sheepishly, the students want gender neutral housing. And he goes, we don't have it yet. And I said, no. He said, oh, well, go ahead and do it. And I said, do you need to tell the board? He goes, why would I tell the board that? Yeah. So if you think about what UNC is spending time on and what the private universities are spending time on, literally, I just wrote an email to somebody and said, go ahead and roll out gender neutral housing. And that's the last time, I don't even remember what happened after that. So if you think about what the private universities are able to do and how much they're able to get done versus what we're going through with all these political challenges, it's just making the gap between public and private even bigger. And that's not good for America because you need Michigan and North Carolina and Florida and these places that are churning out huge numbers of students, or else the whole mobility machine of higher education doesn't work.
Right. Can you elaborate on student affairs before? What do you mean by student affairs?
Student affairs is the dorms and the clubs and the dorms and the clubs and the psychological services for the students and stuff like that. Yeah, Jody.
So thank you. I was wondering, sort of following up on all this, about what you see as the future of diversity in light of the Supreme Court ruling this summer. One of the things that I truly appreciate about UNC is the diversity of the staff, the faculty, but especially the student body. And I came here from Tufts, and it's a lot more diverse. We could use a few more students who know what the word mishugas means, but aside from that, it's really UNC's done a great job, and I wonder what you see going forward.
Yeah, well, I'm very worried about all that, and I'm very proud of the work that I did at both schools on this, just to show you that could be lost. When I went to WashU, a few days, literally July the 7th, 7 days after I started, there was a story in the New York Times saying that WashU was the least accessible top college in America. There's going to be a new winner of that crown here in the next few weeks in the New York Times. So, and that's because our financial aid program was almost non-existent. I mean, WashU was a place where a lot of students paid full freight, and where we only had 6 or 7% of our students that were eligible for Pell Grants, which is students who don't pay anything to go to a private university, low single digits of Black and Hispanic students. And over the time that I was there, we greatly improved all of that. And in fact, the Princeton Review just this week announced that WashU was #1 in financial aid in the country. But the billions, I'm talking billions with a B, that we had to get in endowment and everything to do that, were resources that a lot of other places couldn't put their hands on. And I also paid a high political price for it, because not everybody, there was a reason WashU was the least accessible top college when I got there. And the people who made it that way weren't exactly thrilled with me. But UNC has, of course, never had that problem. And part of the reason why UNC was in the court case was because Leslie Strome, who was our general counsel, and Jack Boger had written an amicus brief in the Fisher case that makes people who don't like affirmative action very, very uncomfortable. It was when, of course, Charles Day, who passed away recently, also contributed significantly to it. And there are a lot of data in that brief that provide support for why you would want to have a lot of Black and Hispanic and low-income students in your undergraduate program. So that's a big reason why that legacy, which of course goes before that to the Carolina Covenant and lots of other things going all the way back, that legacy is really why UNC was with Harvard in the case. So what do I think will happen? Well, I think that, again, getting back to this gap between public and private, the private schools will probably figure out a way to work around it. I mean, they got all kinds of different things they could do, and those records are all private. So unless somebody was willing to run the lawsuit all over again, I think the private universities will probably be able to keep doing more or less what they've been doing. They may have more bureaucratic work to accomplish it. But the public universities, especially the ones in the red states like North Carolina, are going to have to be prepared to have a lot of scrutiny over what they're doing. I mean, if Carolina were to have the same number of Black students next year that we have this year, they're going to have a lot of questions to answer in Raleigh. So that worries me significantly. And it worries me for the future of the country because, despite all its problems, higher education is still the greatest social mobility machine ever developed in the history of the world. Yeah.
Two-part question, one about academics and one about sports.
Okay.
On the academic side, do you think there's any sort of momentum for a federal effort around academic freedom? You see legislative efforts happening in places like California, right? Is there anything to do at the federal level to require academic freedom in the states? Second part is, you hear a lot about conference realignment, and sports radio says that college presidents and chancellors have a lot to say about this. If you were a college president or chancellor, what would you do about conference realignment?
Yeah, okay.
Could you repeat
Right, so the first question is, do I think there'll be a federal effort around academic freedom? I assume you mean academic freedom of professors to...
Yeah, California, for example, has a constitutional amendment that creates a separation between the legislature can't listen on matters that happen at the university system.
Yeah, so you mean the operations of the university or the rights of the individual professors?
The rights of the individual professor.
Yeah, so I assume that will be litigated at some point. And I think that given the sort of free speech inclinations of the courts, I would think this is one of these places where, like a lot of the other things we're seeing now, even conservative judges would be on the side of academic freedom. Of course, not all of them, but I think that would be hard. But I think that the state governments, some of them are going to certainly try to change that. As far as conference realignment is concerned, I mean, I've been all over sports podcasts the last 2 weeks talking about this. When we went through the last go-round, I was the chair of the ACC Council of Presidents. It was a crazy year in sports. On the one hand, I was managing mostly badly a sports scandal, and on the other hand, I was very deftly working with John Swofford on conference realignment to save the ACC. One's based on logic and one's based on intuition. So I did good on the one that was based on logic. And I was the chair when we added Louisville and when we added Notre Dame and when we added, and when we did the grant of rights deal. So I know a lot about what's going on inside all of that. And I've been trying to demystify this for people as much as I can. As far as the business side concerned, it's straightforward. It's about football revenue, and it's really not about anything else. It's not about the Olympic sports. It's not even about men's basketball. It's about the fact that there are two conferences that have been able to sell their football games for twice as much as the others. And if you're in those conferences, you have twice as much TV revenue to spend on being competitive. And so if you want to have a strong football program and you're not in those two conferences, you want to get in those two conferences. Greg Sankey and the new Big Ten commissioner can decide whatever they want to about that with the help of the presidents. So when we were going through all of this, and I think Carolina could have a lot of options, but the problem that Carolina has is that it's politically untenable for them to go anywhere without North Carolina State. The thing to remember whenever you're thinking about politics at UNC, whether it's about sports or anything else, is that you have a board of governors that has NC State partisans on it and UNC partisans on it. And despite the fact that Randy and I were very close, and I know Randy and Kevin are very close, the NC State and UNC people on the board of governors are in vicious competition every day. They don't think about anything except hurting the other side. I mean, I could tell you things that I overheard that would just make your toes crawl. It's one of the ugliest things I've ever seen in my career. And I probably wouldn't have left if it hadn't been for that. At least not when I did. I would have left later because I wouldn't have made it any time at all with these current boards. So if UNC were to go to the Big Ten or the SEC, which they could probably do either one of those, and get twice as much money, and NC State didn't get it, then the vicious actions that would be taken against the chancellor and the university would be insurmountable. I've been on the radio talking about this the last few weeks, and I've had multiple presidents and provosts text me and say, thank me for explaining this to people from the bigger conferences and from the ACC. So I'm certain that dynamic is still there. So if you're UNC, even if you could take one school, you'd have to choose between the political damage that would come from it taking NC State with you, or leaving behind Duke and killing the greatest rivalry in the history of men's basketball. I mean, do y'all want to play Duke on New Year's Eve and that's it? Anybody want to do that? No, so I don't. I wouldn't like that. So that's why I came to the conclusion 10 years ago that the best thing to do is try to strengthen the ACC, because it's the other choices are all terrible. So I think Carolina's probably still in the same position. I don't know that for a fact, but I assume. And so that means they got to try to build the ACC up as much as they can. And if I were doing that, they may have good reasons for doing this Stanford deal. I'm not on the inside of that. But you would think the thing they would want to do is raid some other conferences, some really big football schools. That would boost the revenue. But look, if you think it's about field hockey, I love all those Olympic sports. I loved all that stuff the most. And I just thought Anson was so hysterical. I don't know if you all heard Anson, but he went on TV and said, I want Stanford to die on the vine. This is just a reminder when it comes to sports. Look, I've been in the huddle with many, many Hall of Fame coaches. Okay, when they come to the sideline, the coach doesn't say, go out there and be your best. Think about all the great things you can do with yourself. Feel your inner athlete. They say, go out there and hurt somebody. Literally hurt somebody. I don't know if y'all watch this Urban Meyer thing that's on Netflix right now, but you know what everybody puts their hands in and goes, 1, 2, 3, say something? They go, 1, 2, 3, kill the MFers. Okay? That's what sports is. It's not about people weeping about how wonderful these people are. I mean, field hockey, you know, they take those sticks and just whack people. And so, of course, Anson Dorn says, Stanford, they're our rival. I want their athletics program to collapse. He had to walk that back, but it was a brief glimpse into what really goes on in intercollegiate athletics. So it's about football, it's about money, and it's about beating the crap out of everybody that's on that field. And it's not about anything else.
Oh,
Yeah, Joe.
can you address, or you know anything about Notre Dame? You mentioned that, bringing them in. It would seem that might be the savior of the ACC. Bubba came here from Notre Dame, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was working with Swofford on negotiating that deal. There's no way Notre Dame is going to join a conference in football. That's because there's a clause in that deal that we did with them that says if they ever join a conference in football, they have to join the ACC. Well, that sounds good, but it's a clause that's never, ever going to be invoked. I mean, they've got a gold dome, they've got a grotto, and they've got independence in football. And those are, you know, that's their religion. They have another religion, I guess, but being independent in football might be bigger. I'll let them sort that out. So when they said they would play 5 games against us in football, you know, we were the ones, and Swofford gets the credit for this because he worked all that out. Of course, I said, how about 6, you know? But 5's still a lot because when Notre Dame comes to your town, when Notre Dame comes to Chapel Hill, you know, that's a big deal. Laurie's happy. And it adds a lot to your TV contract to know that you're going to have some of those games that are on your TV contract. Now, Notre Dame, I saw Swarbrick has been advocating very hard to get Cal and Stanford. And he said, this is another thing. Okay, look, these people lie like there's no tomorrow. All right, he's saying, oh, I don't want these 2 great universities, Cal and Stanford, to not have a place to play. That is such bullshit. What he's saying is, there are some, you know how many Notre Dame fans there are in San Francisco? So if Notre Dame plays at Cal or Stanford, they're basically playing a home game in a major city that they can, when it's on their side of the contract, they can sell for a fortune. Right? That's why they want Cal and Stanford, because they don't like to go to Blacksburg. There aren't a lot of Notre Dame fans in Blacksburg, but there's a lot of Notre Dame fans in San Francisco. So that's why Swarbrick, it's not about his feelings about these poor research universities. Okay? It's about he wants Notre Dame to go to Cal and Stanford a lot more than he wants to go to the other ACC schools, almost all of them. And that's the only thing that's driving that. I don't see any way Notre Dame would join any conference in football. I don't see a scenario where it ever happened. Yeah.
Staying on conference realignment, there's been a lot of talk among Carolina fans about would they rather go to the Big Ten or the SEC if a choice had to be made. The feeling being that geographically people would prefer the SEC, but that the school presidents might prefer the Big Ten because of Carolina's fit academically. If you were still in the role as chancellor, how would you address that dynamic?
Oh, so the question is to go to the Big Ten or the SEC?
Weighing the concerns that the fans want one, but the academics seem to want the other.
Yeah, the Big Ten has this thing that, in my opinion, is another artificial thing, which is all the schools they have are in the American Association of Universities, which is a bunch of schools that are really good at research. Is there anyone in America who gets up on Saturday morning, cracks open a cold one, and goes, I want to watch some really good research? No one, okay? That's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard of in my life, all right? So those are some great schools. I mean, Michigan and great public universities, and they would be great partners for UNC. But, I mean, if you're trying to build football, why wouldn't you want to go to the SEC? I mean, you know how many, in the last 20 years, only one cold weather school, 1 year, has won a national championship, and that's Ohio State. All the others are in warm weather.
Could you sell that? Or is that one of those lies you're talking about where people say they want to be a part of the AAU schools in the Big Ten, but really they don't care, even though they're saying that? Could you sell them and be like, guys, we want football, we want to be in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's moot because UNC would have, there'd have to be 3 slots, or else NC State would have to be able to go to another one or something like that. I don't even see how it would happen. But if somebody waved a magic wand and Carolina could just go, I don't know what Kevin would say. That's totally up to him. But if it was me, I would go to the SEC. Not even close. And I know everybody thinks I'm a nerdy guy who doesn't care about football. But if that's the goal, this is a logic problem. If that's the goal, why wouldn't you want to go there? And one of my close peeps now is the president of LSU, Bill Tate, and he and I talk a lot about this stuff. And yeah, they got a great setup. I mean, the SEC is really, really a strong sports machine. Yeah.
Given all that's going on that you talked about academically, are we going to be able to maintain our academic high standards? Or will we become a Hillsdale College or something?
Oh, yeah. So the question is, will we be able to maintain our high academic standards, or are we going to become Hillsdale College? Yeah, we will. Look, there's 2 things. It's true that it's awful that there's all this political tension. And there are a few people who have the opportunity to go to private universities who will go. But the truth is, most of them win anyway. I mean, when Penn comes down here with a huge check, yeah, you might love the public mission and all that, but it's very hard to turn that down. I know, I did that. They gave me a wheelbarrow full of money compared to what I had here. And when I got there, the wheelbarrows of money that I could give to other people was, amazing. I heard the dean of the law school and her partner. It was the first big hire I did when I went there, and the only bigger hire I'd ever done in my life was to hire Larry Fedora to be the football coach of the University of North Carolina. So there are people at these private universities making major multiples of what people are making here. So it's always been the case that when the private universities come, a lot of people go. Now they're coming more often because they know, this is a good place to come get people. But it's still, 2 things are still true, and they're always going to be true, I think. There are tons of high school juniors all over the state of North Carolina and seniors who can't think about anything but coming here to go to college. Those nut jobs on the Board of Governors could not change that. There's nothing they could do to get rid of that. Okay, that is something built over 150 years, 200 and some years, whatever. I'm now doing my other school. More than 200 years. And that's not going to change. And it's also not going to change that this is a $1 billion plus, I think Kevin told me, $1.4 billion research university. There are always going to be young faculty who want to come here and be a part of this. The scale of excellence in research here is spectacular. So yeah, if you really care about all this stuff, it might be pretty uncomfortable. But the other thing to remember is that most of the faculty are not the ones who raise hell at the faculty council meeting. They're not the ones writing the op-eds and all that stuff. I happen to agree with all those people, but that's still a tiny fraction. I mean, most people are over there on Manning Drive typing up proposals and publishing papers and doing their thing and not thinking about all this stuff. So it's very captivating in the media and all that. But as far as the meat and potatoes of the university are concerned, a great way to think about it is to think about the University of Florida. So I know people in Chapel Hill don't like to hear this, but Florida and Georgia Tech are really, really excellent universities. almost as good or maybe the same as UNC Chapel Hill. I know that's hard to contemplate for all these Carolina blue shirts. The University of Florida has horrible, even worse political interference than we have. They're doing great. That school's doing fantastic. When all hell was breaking loose here, and I was getting ready to leave, we had run this provost search to tee up candidates for Carol to be the provost. And she ended up selecting Jim Dean, which was the choice that we all thought she should make, but it was totally up to her. We had another candidate who was a high-ranking administrator at the University of Florida. And I met with all the candidates just to answer their questions. And he goes, I don't get it. What's going on here? Why is everybody so strung out about all this stuff with athletics? And I said, oh, well, that's simple. We didn't realize we were you. And he goes, oh yeah, we went through that years ago. We don't care about that. And so, the University of Florida's totally kicking butt. And now, this is the sad part. I don't want to end on a sad note. We can take one more question after this because this is a sad question. But a lot of the other stuff about Frank Graham and what the university stood for and the light on the hill and all that stuff, that's kind of gone. And I don't know if it'll come back. I really don't. And that breaks my heart because that's what I was raised on. They're trying to kill that. But are they going to kill the excellence of the research program and the strength of the undergraduate program? No, they can't. You can't break that. One more from Bill Baldwin. Ask something happy.
To put back on your hat of Science Magazine, if you took a survey in America today, I would bet that still 50% of Americans would not believe in evolution. Maybe not, but I'm just throwing it out there. Vaccine efficacy, they probably would question. Climate science, global warming, just these issues that it's astonishing to me that we would say this. But I bet you would get, let's say 40%. Now, does that have a lot to do with correlation with religious belief?
Where does science denial come from? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to summarize. There's a 900-page book by Naomi Oreskes called The Big Myth, which you can read, but I'll give you a summary in 2 minutes. So in the 1920s, when electricity was coming to rural America, there was a huge political struggle over whether you could make money on power in the cities, but you couldn't make money on power running the lines and everything for a small number of people in rural America. And there was a huge struggle over whether there would be public cooperatives or whether corporations would somehow get a subsidy from the government to do it. Well, the forces that wanted to get the subsidy from the government to do that got very organized then. And over the last 100 years, there have been very shrewd public relations campaigns to reduce government regulation of all kinds. And almost all the things that we have confusion about are things that imply more government regulation, right? You can't solve climate change with industry. I know you all love your electric cars, but you're recharging them with coal-fired electricity. So then it's only getting you so far. The only way you would change that is to have built more nuclear power plants or to have more renewables that had to be subsidized by the government or something like that. Vaccines, nobody wants to be required, people that are resisting being required to get a vaccine. Evolution, parents don't want people saying what their kids can be taught and whether it's secular enough. I mean, all of these things have to do with the objections. Because you think about it, there's lots of science, like cancer research, quantum computing. These things don't imply government regulation. Nobody's out on the street with a sign saying no quantum computers. So the things that become contentious are the things that imply government regulation. And of course, it's perfectly, it's a well-circulated political philosophy to be against government regulation, but it's easier to debate the science, which you can confuse people about, than it is to debate whether we should have government involved in reducing climate change or not. And so this very shrewd PR and political effort always pushes down to debate the science, which is easy to confuse people about, than to debate the real question, which is, okay, this is real, what are we going to do about it? That's harder, because then you have to justify the fact that you would care so much about reducing government regulation that you're okay with all the effects of climate change, or we got malaria in Maryland now. So that's really what is going on there. And as I was saying earlier, the contribution of the scientists to this problem is we think our stuff is so beautiful that if we just explain it to you as lucidly and beautifully as we can, you'll go, oh, I got it now, right? And which is a very arrogant point of view, because you're taking the position that, oh, well, the reason these people don't understand this is because they're not capable of it, and we haven't done a good enough job teaching them. Well, anybody who wants to learn anything can learn it. And so the scientists have been very easily manipulated by all this, because every time this happens, we send out another video about, how natural selection works, or about how we measure the temperature up in the atmosphere, which tells us, that climate change is happening. So I can't do anything about the political forces. But what I'm trying to do in my role is get the science, just like we're doing talking about intercollegiate athletics or politics in higher education, is to get scientists to wake up to the fact that they're trying to solve the wrong problem. And we've been trying to solve the wrong problem for 100 years. And that has contributed to the fact that we've got it here. It's wonderful to see your faces again, and I'm so happy to be here. I've known Bill Bolin and Jim Hevner and a lot of you since I was a child, and thank you for inviting me. It's really, really great to be
here. It's from Amina, a foundation that's so